Ohio's music scene is robust and alive. Someone from the East or West Coast may not think it when they are considering good music locales, but I hear a whole lot of heart and soul and creativity coming out of the Rust Belt these days, and Ohio is no exception. Lots of working bands from the whole spectrum of popular music. One of the bands I've run into is a team of 5 real talented and creative guys out of Dayton. They call themselves Praey. That's spelled Praey. On vocals, you've got Brian Campbell. Jeff Linder plays guitar. Stephen Wyatt also plays guitar. Charlie Andrews on bass. And Nat Job on drums. There's a really cool psychedelic rock and roll thing going on here. I also really love the singer, Brian. He's got a possessive voice that really lures you in. It's been hard for me to put my finger on their very original sound. It's real dark and melodic, almost tortured, in a good for the art kind of way. You can feel their struggle in their music. They themselves call it post-punk, dark wave, alt-rock. I think I saw them referring to it as shoegaze even. If I absolutely had to describe it, I'd have to say it sounds like as if David Bowie, Jim Morrison, and Robert Smith got together and wrote the soundtrack to Breakfast Club. But then they had Pink Floyd perform it out on some remote, deserted island somewhere. I absolutely love the sound these guys have going on. They've also got a couple videos on YouTube that I really like. Praey has a brand new single that they're releasing tomorrow, October 11th, on Spotify. But they're giving all of us here on RadioLoveZ the first listen to it tonight. I'll be playing it later at the end of the show. I got to sit down with the band for a little while recently. I was already a fan of their music, but to talk to them and hear how much of themselves that they're putting into every detail that surrounds the music, not just the music itself, was impressive to me. I really got the sense that as a group, they seem to look to Brian, the lead vocalist, for inspiration. But they're all multi-talented, not only as musicians, but as producers and sound engineers also. Let's take a listen to our conversation. Where does the name Praey come from? Am I saying that right? Is it Praey?
It is Praey.
Okay, and where does that come from?
Well, it's kind of like, it's just something that really makes you think. It's not really supposed to, like, purely be religious or purely be, like, an aggressive male thing. It's just mostly, like, to make you think and wonder, like, well, what are these guys all about? What do they do? And then when you stop and have them thinking, then that's when you got them. Because then they'll stop, like, okay, well, what do their songs sound like? What do they do? How does the vocalist sound? That's really what we were going for, really.
So it's just a word just to provoke thought.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. That's real awesome. You guys came out of 2 different, real different band styles. It sounds like in 2015, you had a goth / shoegaze band called Where the Nameless Dwell. And
oh yeah, Where the Nameless Dwell.
Yeah, and the other band was alternative rock / blues band called Butterfly Sting. Is that right?
Yeah, Nat's more of the Butterfly Sting guys.
Okay.
I've only heard a little bit of that, but
okay. And
yeah, it's probably been a mesh. Just like a clash of different styles, but like we just blended together.
Awesome. Did you guys know each other before you got together, or how did that come about?
Well, Nat was our drummer for Where the Nameless Dwell. He actually introduced Brian to us when that kind of like went on hiatus and then ultimately just kind of got canceled. But yeah, like, so he introduced him. He's like, he's been looking for someone to like really bring his vision to his music, because like he knows what he wants to hear. He just doesn't actually like play guitar that much. So he just brought him to us and said like, yeah, this is what we've been doing. Can you guys match with that, or can you guys add something to that? And we've just kind of headed on to it from there.
I was a teenager in the late 70s and early 80s, and you guys don't sound like you're from that era at all, but there's a vibe that I get from your music that really takes me there. It takes me to what I call the Breakfast Club era. Elaborate on that a little bit. There's got to be a reason why I'm feeling that from it.
I think you're probably picking a lot of that up from Brian's influence. Brian, one of his favorite bands is Cream. And, he's, big into the classic rock and the blues. Right. He knows, that's his catalog, that's his wheelhouse.
Right.
Going all the way back to, Sinatra.
Really?
He knows the whole Sinatra catalog. Yeah, he can do...
Oh, I'd love to hear that. That's
wonders
awesome.
He's got some recordings of him doing some Sinatra songs.
Wow.
We've actually talked about maybe taking one or two covers and Praeyifying them.
My mom would love him.
He comes out of that... Oh, the old ladies do love him.
Yeah, I'll bet they do.
But I think his approach and his style, where he's coming out from, is more like a traditional rock and blues kind of background. And you alluded to sort of like the Jim Morrison kind of vibe, and that kind of thing. So when we were in Butterfly Sting together, that's what Butterfly Sting was. We were a kind of a rock and blues band. Right. And then Where the Nameless Dwell, that I was in with Charlie and Jeff, was more of a goth rock band. And so to combine the genres has been a really interesting experiment for us. But I think a lot of that sort of classic rock sound is Brian's touch to his approach. I think also probably to some of the mixing. We don't hyper compress things the way a lot of artists do nowadays. Everything's got to be cranked up and be really loud and aggressive, and we've purposefully kept things more, a little bit quieter, more dynamic range. And so I think just when we play the songs back, they don't sound as loud, but if you were to play our stuff alongside stuff of that era, it would fit.
Right.
Just, I think, partly because of the way that we approached the recording aspect of it.
Huh. Okay. So you guys engineer all your stuff yourself?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shoegaze, I'm a lot older than you guys. Okay, but I've been rocking out since the 70s, but shoegaze is a relatively new term to me. And I'd like to hear you guys explain it. Really, I understand it comes out of goth, is what I think.
There was sort of an offshoot, and you asked him about the origin of shoegaze, and Jeff could probably speak to this even better than I could. You had this sort of post-punk artists coming out of the U.S. and England that would really just layer their guitar sounds very thick and very loud, and the vocal style is kind of buried under and merged into the guitar, almost like if you were to take a synthesizer and a guitar and kind of blend them together, and you can't really tell where one starts and the other one stops.
Okay, so that's on purpose.
So the singers, the origin of the term, it was some newspaper, I think, somewhere, talking about how the singers would just stare down. They really wouldn't look out at the audience. They would just stare down at their feet and, quote unquote, gaze at their shoes.
Wow. So
you have navel gazing and the self-introspective kind of stuff. But not so much with the two songs that we released, but on the next song, on A Place and Time, the next one we're going to release, you'll hear more of that interplay between the synthesizers and the guitars and the vocals, kind of you're starting to play a little bit with feedback and really just layering sounds out of the wall of noise kind of tradition. But just, everything is just kind of cranked up and varied and hard to distinguish parts. And that's, so that's an influence. Jeff and I in particular have more of a shoegaze influence, I think, because the style kind of had a bit of a resurgence in the early 90s, mid 90s. So, for us, we were in high school, in the early 90s. So, it kind of, I think some of that influence started to kind of come out with what Praey was producing. And it's kind of what Charlie alluded to earlier. We just kind of try to take different styles and ideas from different genres and slam them together. And so on A Place in Time, that was a genre that just kind of came out of the material. We can't really predict what genres we're going to throw together. It just kind of comes out naturally. But then when you catch a hint of like, oh, okay, now I understand like what influence was in my approach to that song when I played it, then, the next time you play it, and then finally when you record it, that's built into it a little bit more. But in the beginning, you just kind of do it and don't think much of it, and then you have to go back and figure out what you did.
Is there a David Bowie fan amongst you guys? Because I feel like I can hear a lot of David Bowie here and there.
I'd say probably all of us to some extent.
Awesome.
Are we all David Bowie fans? Yeah. It's funny because that name, has actually been dropped by other listeners as well.
Huh.
And it's not something like anything intentional about it. Like if somebody asked me, who are my influences? Bowie would probably not be in my top 5.
Right.
But I think that just the weight of his art has come down through the culture.
Sure.
And so you get influenced by artists that you don't even realize that you're influenced by. Just they're there and they're part of it.
Some shadow of him in your music, I really do. Praey's really got some great songs, just like you just heard. But I've also been impressed with their video. So in God's Guns and Signs, who's the guy in the mirror?
I don't know. That the footage for that video, actually the footage for all of our videos is stock.
Seriously? That is so funny.
Brian edited that video. So
okay. So that's nobody in the band. I kind of figured that might be Brian or something. And
nope.
Wow. So
nope. It's one of the things that we kind of talked about as a band. Do we want to appear in videos or not appear in videos? And I don't think we've come down to an actual opinion on the matter as much as just the difficulty of getting everybody in the room at the same time and a budget and lights and storyboarding and all that. If you're really going to do it right, it gets expensive and time consuming so we just decided, for this phase, we would just go with the cheap and easy thing. And Brian has some experience in video production and stuff, so he we found the footage that we liked. For Feel Strange, same deal. It's just 2 different, actually I think 3 different video clips from British Cafe, and I was trying to find a tone. I did that video and just trying to find clips that sort of captured a tone, rather than telling a narrative or here's the band standing in the woods and here's the band in a forest and here's the band on train tracks. And,
I felt like guys. I think that's a great driving beat that makes you want to stand up and move, really. And I think you really captured that real well in the video too.
Yeah, when I found that footage. There's the people that are sort of dancing at this underground party or something.
Right.
All the women in costumes and stuff, and the one ridiculous guy. I love that guy. But when I saw that footage, I'd look through, hours and hours and hours of footage trying to find what was right. And I saw that, and I was like, I got to use this footage. This is amazing. It fits the attitude and everything perfectly.
I hear that Brian's not only a great rock and roll singer, but that he's also quite the crooner. That the little old ladies just love him.
Yeah, he can definitely go that route. He could be a lounge lizard, in another lifetime.
That's funny.
And I think he did go to Vegas. Was he in Vegas? I know he was out in Utah. He's got family out there, and that's something that we've kind of joked about. If life had gone another path, he'd be out there in Vegas doing a Wayne Newton hour.
That's funny. Does he write his own lyrics? Is that a team effort?
Pretty much him. I mean, we might kind of toss around a couple ideas about a specific word or a specific line. you say, oh, well, what happens if we put, this in or this in or this in instead? But the vast majority of the time, we end up going back to what he wrote originally.
When it comes to music, do you guys already, do you come together and already have your own ideas, or do you just get together and go with the flow, or how do you approach that?
All of the above.
All of the above?
People are certainly free, yeah. I think Feel Strange started with a riff that Charlie brought to us. God's Guns and Signs was a song that Brian had already kind of had. And then just, the ideas kind of mix, but sometimes we'll just sort of jam on something.
Right.
A lot of times we will record practices and then go back and listen to the practices for any little nuggets of an idea of, that was a great riff.
Yeah,
okay, what happens if we take that riff and this riff and put them together, and I've got some lyrics that'll fit that, and we'll just kind of assemble things.
Right.
I don't know if we've ever had any songs that have come in like fully done where somebody says, there's a song I wrote and here's how to play it. It's much more of a collaborative process where everybody, contributes a little bit.
Right.
And, I might hear a lick that Jeff played, it'll change my approach to a drum beat. And then I'll change what I'm doing, that will change what Charlie's doing on the bass. And then that'll change, what the rhythm track or the rhythm guitar is doing, and it kind of goes around in a big circle.
Right.
Until what you ended up with at the end of that process might not look at all like what you started with. And it's not anything that any one person could have written by themselves. And I think that's where we get this strange blend of different styles. I think that's where it comes from, is going through that circular writing process.
Steven came into the band a couple years later. How'd that come about?
Well, I brought him in because I know he was looking for something to play in. He hasn't played it in a while. I knew he could do a really mean lead guitar, so I just thought he'd be a good fit.
So you guys were friends before, or you'd been in band before, or?
We've been friends, but yeah, this was the first time we've been in the band together.
Do you guys think that your music has changed a lot since 2015?
I'd say probably, yeah. I think we've just, matured as a band. When we started out, and it was just, the four of us before Steven had joined, we used more synthesizers and more backing acts like that. And that stuff was sort of helping carry the load, the musical load of parts that we wanted to have in the songs, but we didn't have enough personnel to play those parts. And it's kind of a quick way to go ahead and get some material playable. You've already got a backing track there, and you just kind of come in and play along to it. When we brought Steven in, we wanted to kind of take more of a rock direction, which I think you alluded to was sort of the classic rock sound and stuff. We pulled back a little bit from the synthesizers and like the drum machines and the backing tracks, and brought in more, traditional guitar, and everything kind of went through a rewrite. Even on like God's Guns and Signs, the vocal sample that we use in there now, the T.S. Eliot bit, that was not in that song when it was originally written. But we I kind of felt like, we need something to fill in some space here. But we didn't want to fill it in with like another guitar solo. And so I had the thought about, let's use a sample. And so that sample came to mind, and we put that in. And that just sort of, creates a bridge in that song that wasn't there when we wrote it. But it seems like, at least to me, it seemed like a good choice. It fit well. But we wouldn't have done that without sort of that recording process and circular process and saying, there's a big gap right here where we need something. So I think that things change through the rewrites.
Do you think the band has changed?
More rock, less pop.
Right. I don't hear any pop in your guys' music. I really don't.
So we've got some other material that's poppier.
Okay. Yeah.
It just hasn't really been recorded yet, and that's kind of one of those. We've got one song in particular that I think could be like a great pop single, like radio friendly. It could be a commercial song.
Right.
And it's kind of like, well, do we play it that way, or do we, darken it up and kind of make it a little bit more of a, I guess, what people would consider a Praey song.
Right.
But what's funny is that song was written before Praey was a band. That's leftover riff that we had from a previous band where the name was Swell. And it was a song that never got developed, and then we just kept the riff. We said, let's change this up. And, a lot of times you could take a pop song and just slow down the tempo.
Right.
And it ceases to be a pop song. Or you could take a slow dirgy song and speed it up and turn it into a pop song. So that's kind of a question, like, when we go to record that song, do we, do it as a pop song? Do we do it sort of tongue-in-cheek as a pop song? So we'll just kind of have to see. There is one in this collection that's got some sort of pop elements to it. It'll be, I don't know, I'll probably release 2 or 3 songs from now. But it's gotten some comparisons to like the Cars intro to it.
Nice.
So that's kind of interesting. So we dabble in that style too, but we just haven't recorded or put anything out yet that's kind of that pop vein.
Right.
But we will.
But I think basically if it feels good, do it. As far as music goes.
Right. And it's a nice change too. You can't have 10 songs in a row that are all 80 beats a minute.
Sure.
You got to have some change ups to the show and the material.
Yep. And you can't let someone tell you it's too poppy. I mean, if it feels right, it feels right. Really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All genres are fair game.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the music scene like in Dayton?
It's actually pretty rad. We got a solid amount of artists out here. Anything from psychobilly, metal, folk, hip-hop. A lot of metal. A lot of good artists out here. Jasper the Colossal, Dave Barry, Mora, Goodnight, Goodnight. We've actually played numerous shows, Goodnight, Goodnight. They're like our sister band.
Awesome. If you guys could play any venue in the world, what would it be?
Oh, shit. Any venue in the world? Oh, that would probably be it wouldn't be a venue, it would actually be a studio. It would be the KXAT out west. They're on their live session.
Oh, sweet.
Now let's play Red Rocks.
Yeah, Red Rocks. Yeah, that'd be my dream one. The name of your new album and the title of the new single both seem to speak about the passage of time. And I was just wondering, is that exposing some type of lesson that the band has learned recently?
I don't think so. The single, A Place in Time, it's just, it is very like cyclic in the way that it was written. It's a song that like it'll tease a modulation or a chord change, but then we don't do it. And it's not until I think like the third verse or something that we sort of actually acknowledge like, going around in circles. And I think that's, Brian's a lyricist, so, obviously like, I've talked to him and stuff about, what are his lyrics about or whatever, but he purposefully keeps things kind of ambiguous.
Right.
So
that's funny you say that, because
clearly
that's word for word what I was gonna. One of the questions I was gonna, the ambiguous statement. That's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's intentional to his approach.
Right. I like that.
I think that he has things in mind when he writes.
Right. Sure.
But like a lot of artists, you don't always know your own motives or your subconscious motivations. You might think a song is about one thing,
right,
and then you listen to it a year later and discover, maybe it was about a different thing.
Sure.
And you yourself, even the writer, isn't aware of it. I think just with Place and Time, wanting to talk about just cycles and how things repeat, is time cyclic or is time linear, and it's, I think, more about posing the question than like providing an answer. So, and I think that's probably true for a lot of his songs, like Charlie kind of mentioned, I think, with probably God's Guns and Signs. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people about that song, and a lot of them, I think, like they don't quite get it, like what it's about, but it's also, it's about whatever they think it's about is what it's about to them.
Right. Well, I was going to get to that song too. While you're on it, we might as well jump ahead a little bit to that.
Okay.
I've noticed there's so many meanings that someone could take away from just the phrase itself: God's guns and signs.
The search engines have showed us some really interesting meanings.
Sure. No, it did me too. No, that's a good observation.
Yep.
But I feel like that's the beauty of great art. Everyone can walk away with their own point of view and emotional response to it. But is there a meaning to Praey for that song?
I think there's probably a different meaning for each of us in the band.
Awesome.
We have diverse, political beliefs and stuff ourselves. And I think what Brian was trying to capture when he wrote it was, I guess that, let's have the conversation. But it's also just about how people will fall back on these old ways of knowing and older ways of behaving.
Okay.
And the next new bright shiny object can come along. And in the case of the lyrics, the narrator in the song sort of puts himself in that position. What if I was this Pied Piper character? Would you follow me? But in the end, instead of making a choice, really any choice, people just kind of revert back to their old ways of thinking, their gods and their guns and their signs. One thing that I've always kind of liked about it is like the word signs in there. It doesn't say what kind of signs those are.
Right.
And so there's sort of an aspect within the song that you can, like, if you're partisan, you can read yourself into the song standing on either side of that partisan divide.
Sure. You could read religion into it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, we have some other songs coming down the pipe that touch on those themes, too.
Right.
So, Brian is very, I think he's very aware of those themes, and that stuff is intentional. But when he's writing it, he's just writing it because that's what's coming out of him. I don't think he's really thinking about the themes when he writes it as it being like, I want to make a song about religion. It's just like that's what he's thinking, and so that's what comes out.
Right.
And then we can, kind of polish it up and try to clean it up and stuff later.
Well, that's my conversation with Praey out of Dayton, Ohio. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm Dr.Blu, and this has been Dr. Blu's Local Reviews. I'm a lifelong rock and roller that's always been obsessed with music, every aspect of it, and I really enjoy speaking with all the great bands from all around the country. Praey is truly a great group of artists that have a stellar passion for creativity, and their music is fantastic. If you're in the Dayton, Ohio area, make sure to try to catch one of their shows, which I'm convinced is going to be just as stellar as they are.